Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Belgian Football Podcast. My name is Ben Jackson. I am back to host after the international break. Joris and Scott, they're still here. They weren't physically still here, but they are very much still here to talk all things Belgian football. Guys, did you enjoy the international break?
Ooh, that's the toughest question we're maybe going to get asked this week. Do you know, I haven't enjoyed an international. I can't remember the last one I actually enjoyed, to be honest, or even tournament. Come to think of it, but it's good. It's good to be back talking about kind of domestic football. I'll say that much.
Well, it was fun to see your own international break, Vin, a little bit, to follow that a little on your socials. That was fun. But apart from the footballing part, I also did not enjoy as much, even though the results were ultimately okay, I guess, for Belgium. Not the 6 points we wanted, but good enough, I guess you could say.
Yeah, they got there in the end, didn't they? And I mean, I'm not going to do it on this podcast because otherwise we could spiral off into a completely different conversation. But I actually love an international break. But I don't watch any European qualifiers to kind of qualify that. I'm watching like African football mainly during that time. That's when I get to watch all the international teams. And yeah, I was in Rwanda, but I arrived a day late for their clash with Benin in qualification, which is a shame. But did manage to watch them lose to South Africa, and yeah, all the guys in the hotel that I was staying at just stopped working to watch the game, despite them not having any chance of progressing. And I was just like, "This is what football means. Like people just, no matter what kind of, there's nothing riding on this game, but they're just going to stop working to watch this," which was great. I was fully respected that, and I was just like, "I'm just going to sit with them and watch the game," and it was great.
So you stopped working as well?
Yeah, I wasn't working at that point.
Does your employer know?
Yeah, I was going down for my beer at that point. I was like, I needed one after a very, very long day. So nothing better than in a hot country, a cold beer watching a game of football. It's just, yeah, a wonderful experience for sure. But as Scott said, we were back to domestic action in the Pro League. Let me quickly run through the results. Usually I do this in chronological order. But should I start with Friday? Because technically the game starts on Friday. One of them started on Friday, but didn't end until Monday. So maybe it was 1-0 on Friday night between Standard Liège and Antwerp. I'll let you know what the score was by Monday later on. Ral La Louvière kicked off the Saturday fixtures at home to Westerlo. And if you've been following Ral's results recently, you will know that ended 0-0 because all their games at the moment are ending 0-0. Solid at the back, but maybe struggling to score goals. Is that a concern? Maybe not. Or is it a case of as soon as they start finding the back of the net, they could kind of put on a nice little run of wins together? Club were, I could say maybe fortunate to win 1-0 against Leuven. Jakkers was the busier of the two goalkeepers, that's for sure. Leuven without David Hubert in charge. And did they look better going forward? Did they just look a better team without David Hubert? That's not for me to say.
I like the way you whispered that.
But David Hubert was in action on Saturday because somehow he's now manager of Union Saint-Gilloise. We will talk about that because, yeah, let's just say it caused a little bit of a stir when that one popped out. But he got off to a winning start. They beat Charleroi by 3-1. Ironically, it was that the battle of the manager they really wanted against the manager they ended up just having to go for? Answer on a postcard, please. Cercle Bruges against Genk. That one kicked off the Sunday slate. I was actually at that game, which was great. I'll talk about that a little bit later. It was a slightly chaotically amusing story on my part as to kind of getting to the game, finding where I was meant to be in the game, and getting out of the game. The game itself was very entertaining. That one finished 2-2. Dender, they lost again. They should have scored, but they didn't. They lost 3-1 at home to Mechelen. St. Truden and Anderlecht drew some fantastic goals in that game, to be honest. And shout out actually to Maury Konate for that first goal against Dender. When I was looking at the stats, guys, I think there was one of Nathan Rhodes was decided as having made an error in that first goal for Maury Konate. The ball gets past, Konate steps in, but he still miles out and then bangs it in the top of the top bins. And it's like, that's not really Nathan Rhodes' fault, is it? Like, it's not like that was a guilt, like the worst mistake he could make, and he gifted the goal on a plate to Konate, is it? Like the XG on that must have been 0, especially from Konate as well. But like, what a hit! What an absolute rocket! Waregem, they absolutely battered Ghent by 4-1. Jeppe Ehrenberg on some decent form then. We then had like 7 minutes of standard liaise against Antwerp to finish on Monday. It was 6-7 minutes. It stayed 1-0. So that was fun for all involved to have to go back out there and do that again. But let's start with that game then, guys. I think we kind of have to talk about it, don't we, in terms of the incident that meant that we were starting on Friday and ending on Monday. The game was winding down. It'd been heated, let's face it. Like, there'd been some decisions that people didn't agree with. But then a cup was thrown at the referee from the stands, and he was just like, "No, I'm not doing it. We're going off, and we're kind of suspending this game." And I think it's that you have to do that. Like, do you know what I mean? That you can't be throwing stuff at referees. You can't be throwing stuff at players. And I think they should do it with players as well. I think too many times we see it where things get thrown at players when they're taking a corner or something and nothing happens. Or they're celebrating a goal and things get thrown at them and nothing happens. I mean, the referee as well, it's just mad. Like, I saw a couple of comments being like, it's a cup now, but like that could have been anything that gets thrown at him. You just have no idea. I think you'd be frustrated if you're a standard fan as a collective, because you'd be like, this is just one fan that's completely ruined it for us. And I think he's got to get a massive, massive fine and a ban. Like, he shouldn't be allowed back in the stadium. If it's a he or a she, I'm not sure. I haven't seen kind of if they've done anything about that. But yeah, what are your guys' thoughts on the craziness of that? And then I guess some of the reactions that came out afterwards as well.
I think there's a principle here, really. You know, Ben's already touched on it about, you know, it could be anything in theory. But to be fair, it was the third incident in the game, and kind of following the rules, strictly speaking, you know, the referee's, you know, entirely entitled to do that. I thought some of the aftermath of it, you know, from a press point of view, you know, some of Mark Wilmot's comments were a little bit daft, really. He decided to pile on to referees, really, you know, in the heat of the moment and the passion of the situation. For me, I was watching it and thinking, your team's winning 1-0. You know what I mean? They're on the edge of winning this game. You know what I mean? Why would you be daft enough to potentially put that in jeopardy, really? Which makes it just kind of even madder. Although you know, the Standard fans are not the first group of fans in Belgium to have done something silly that's seen a game interrupted and abandoned when they were in a winning position. Ludicrous stuff, really. But yeah, poor Antwerp. I do feel for them a little bit, because, you know, they had a 3-hour drive, I think, three and a bit hours, to do a 20-minute warm-up again to play 6 to 7 minutes worth of football. You know, it would have been really interesting if they'd managed to equalise during that time. So in a way, part of me is kind of glad that the remaining 6 minutes passed without incident, but slightly farcical. I think the frustration for a lot of people was the fact that the game was abandoned when it was so late. Part of the argument for not abandoning it was, look, you know, we're in stoppage time here. Let's just get it finished, you know. But again, you know, I think you have to follow the rules on these things, and I do actually have quite a lot of sympathy with the referees department on this. It's just, you know, it's just unnecessary behaviour, to be honest. I know people can't resist an opportunity to have a pop at referees. You know, I think most fans are kind of quite frustrated with them. Certainly a lot of coaches are, and there's definitely a conversation around probably the standard of refereeing, which people always want to discuss kind of every week. But the thing is, the referees, and this is where I'm going to defend them a little bit here, I think, they don't often get credit when it is due as well. That's the other side of this. You know, there's always the scrutiny on them is almost as intense as it is in some players, just in a different way. The difference is referees don't quite have the, they're protected to a certain extent in the way that coaches and players maybe aren't when scrutiny's on them. So that's I think where a lot of the tension comes in. But as bizarre as it all was, I was kind of fine with it. It was very Belgian in a way. We've got a situation now where Standard have also come out and said, we're taking responsibility. Nobody's allowed to drink any beer in the stands until the new year. So get your pints in, but get them drunk in the concourse before you go to your seat. So this wonderful thing, this wonderful, not uniquely Belgian, but Belgian beer is uniquely good, I would argue. We can pick that up later. is going to suffer. No one's going to be able to drink the stuff in the stands because of something like this, which I find kind of ironic, but also a bit sad at the same time. It's never dull around these parts, guys, is it?
No, it definitely isn't. And yeah, collective measurements, are they the right measurements? Always a question, of course. But on the other hand, have to nuance Vince's comment of it's only one fan. Of course, that's not entirely true because it was a third strike. So it's not that there were no incidents before. So yeah, and given that situation is very understandable. Even without that, maybe, but especially given that was the case. Yeah, I don't think it's any argument that it was late in the game. That's just, it could have been earlier, but that's not up to the referee. Of course, it's the incident that happened. So the thrower of that cup. Of course, some measurements are taken. Wilmon's comments are just an embarrassment for Standard, I think, to be honest. I do think indeed it's maybe one of the reasons why they took this collective measurement as well, to maybe also in PR sense to give a sign, like PR and legal sense, to give the sign like we are taking it seriously. Whether that's the right thing to do, yeah, that's something that's another discussion maybe, but just fully support that decision of the referee as well, indeed. Not necessarily all the decisions that have been taken throughout the game, but that's never the case anyway for no fan of no club of anywhere in the world. So that's overgeneralization maybe, but it's not so far from the truth, I guess. That's I mean, a shame, of course, but in the end, probably the right decision. And yeah, just in the end, only also the result didn't change. So just very annoying for the fans in the stadium on Friday that weren't allowed in, although some of them made it too close to the stands outside of the stadium on Monday as well, of course. But also, especially the Antwerp fans, I guess, and all the players on the pitch, especially the Antwerp players, indeed, who kind of got a slight disadvantage, having to resume the game with one man in advantage, against the side that is, of course, a bit fresher. But okay, maybe that's not even that important. I don't think that much would have changed by the looks of it on Friday either, on a sportive level. But just a shame for the Antwerp players, of course, and staff and everyone from Antwerp that needed to be in the stadium on Monday again to indeed have that trip. But it's not unheard of. Maybe, yes, the reasons are different, but in the Netherlands, actually 2 years ago, 2 games with very similar amount of time, very different circumstances. So I really need to stress that there were more severe circumstances, maybe at the core of that, but had to be played, and there were also long bus trips there with fans allowed, I believe, in that case at least. But I do think it's the right decision in the end, and okay, let's see. That's it for now. Let's see if there's something more to follow out of this as well. But for the moment, that's all we have. There remains a question, like, should Standard actually get the points? I guess yes, because the players don't really. I mean, for me, yes, the case the players didn't really have anything to do with it. But the main thing also was the commotion that there was right when everything was unfolding. I have to admit, I went with the commentators myself as well, but nobody seemed to know the regulation. Like, everyone was saying, like, oh, this is going to be a 0-5 forfeit for Antwerp now, because the game is not. That used to be the case, of course, until a few years ago when they changed those rules. But the unknowingness of a lot of people closer to the football, that unfortunately, like I said, I fell victim to myself, but was quite staggering, to be honest, especially if some people, a certain Hans van Azenbroek, as we all know, like, kept claiming to know the regulations, and like and also yeah, sometimes making comments to others not knowing the regulations throughout the game before this thing happened, of course, on completely different kind of regulations, of course, but still, yeah, that's still a bit funny. Like, it really took a while before all the news sites had it wrong in the beginning. I think it at least was half an hour or maybe an hour even. Where people were thinking, okay, the game is lost for Standard now. I guess actually, to be honest, regardless of the commentators, but also the players, by the looks of it, had the same thoughts when everyone needed to go back inside and the game was called off on Friday. Yeah, but yeah, that I do think this is a fairer way of doing things, nonetheless, than the forfeit. Because to be honest, Antwerp did not really deserve that. Whether that's a point or not is another thing, but yeah, I think it was a fair decision.
That thing about Hein just makes you think of, I don't know if you guys have seen, there's a guy that's like recently started kind of like, he calls it like the HMRC of kind of football, where if a footballer goes on a podcast and lies, he brings up the receipts and tells them that they're lying. And I feel like if there was a Belgian version of this and Hein was on certain podcasts, I feel like he would be the sort of man that would tell stories that never ever happened in such a way that he'd then get called up and the receipts would be found. He gives me that vibe. And yeah, unfortunately, we don't have access to his commentary and his the things he's saying over here, but that would be quite fun. And yeah, I think the thing is with like the referees as well. Like we can complain about the standard of refereeing and stuff, but it's also like a chicken and egg situation where it's like the more pressure they're under, the more hate they get, the more kind of abuse they get. It's like the less people are actually going to want to do it. And less people that want to do it, you're never going to get the standard that you want. So this isn't just a Belgian thing, that this is like a football route all over the world sort of thing where, yeah, we aren't really getting your Kalinas and stuff like that like we used to, where they were quite intimidating referees that kind of stood up to players and were able to kind of demand respect and that. But hopefully we won't see anything like this again this season. Following on from that, I'm just gonna the game I obviously saw in person, feels like it'd be a nice little segue to talk a bit about that. Joris can obviously talk a bit about Genk as well, and at the end of it, we can kind of talk about how we think they're going to do against Betis coming up in the European fixtures. But yeah, as many of you may have seen, I was there, having had no sleep whatsoever. Just got off a plane from Kigali, travelled straight to Bruges, got lost on the way to the stadium because Google Maps was telling me 5 different ways to go. So I ended up not getting there until 1 o'clock.
See, all the listeners, those who listen to us regularly will know that this is a ground that we've been to before, and there's people scratching their heads going, what? Ben's been to the Ambriden for. How could he get lost going to a stadium he's already been to? There you go.
I was in some like housing estate at one point, like that didn't have a path, and I was just like, "This is." I was like, I'm blaming it on my lack of sleep and my being
absolutely.
You definitely were in some kind of trance state.
Yeah,
as well,
yeah,
so
literally. I was
to a certain level, and I guess that can come to orientation sometimes as well.
It's because I was an idiot and thought I'm going to walk to the stadium. Gave myself an hour. I was like, I'll leave the city centre at 11:30. I had a nice little time, kind of having a coffee, having a hot chocolate, doing all the little touristy things. I was like, I love going to Bruges. It's very touristy, but when you live in somewhere like Worthing, it's quite nice to see pretty buildings and pretty things and nice little touristy bits. Yeah, finally got to the stadium, and I'd been told to go to like the press room that no one seemed to know where it was. Did it even exist? I didn't. But at some point, I thought this place doesn't exist. Like, I was asking all these people, like, "Where's the press bar?" Because I was like, I just want a drink of something and I want some food. One man in the stadium knew where it was, thankfully, and he could speak English enough to direct me to it. Walked in. It was kind of what you expect, but they had a nice little roll. Nice roll. I'll give them that. The roll was pretty decent. Then they had this banoffee pie tart thing, and that was killer. That was like far too small. It should have been a lot bigger. I should have clocked on when everyone was having cuppa soups that they knew something that I didn't, which was that it's absolutely freezing in the press gantry at the Ambriden. It was, having come from like 25, 26 degree, nice hot African heat to the freezing cold Belgian October. It was miserable. And then folding myself into my little seat number 23. But yeah, I have to like kind of thoughts on the game and stuff. Like obviously, the last time I saw Circle in person, it was Muslic's ball. It was them against Charleroi. It was them kind of more their kind of peak. They had Denki, they had Awada, they had kind of those players that were kind of they were going places and they've gone on to go places. This team, you can tell it's not as good. Like you can see the difference in qualities there, and you can see the difference in you can see what Sinel wants them to do at times, but I feel like the pressing game that was there under Muslic is not there. They don't have those guys that can recover the ball, especially in the central areas. I think Van der Bruggen and Gherkins, they were playing 4-4-2, and I think Fink's eyes lit up when he was just like, we've got Bangura, we've got Brian Hayden in the midfield. They just ran rings around them to start the game. Like the mobility of those two, Bangura especially, like he's so impressive to see in person. He's tall, good on the ball, passes it quite well. Hayden as well, I thought, like giving away my player of the week because I thought it had to be from this game. He was, for me, by far the best player on the pitch, just in terms of control of the ball, eye for pass, getting things going, winning tackles, winning his duels, everything like that. He was great. Circle as well, like I think I messaged you guys as well that Utkus was having a mare, and I think that's one of the worst kind of performances I've seen from a defender for some time. Him and Kaku were just getting absolutely rinsed by Joris on the wing, but thankfully for them, Joris just has no finishing like comprehension. I guess we could say like eye for a pass wasn't there, eye for a shot wasn't there, no finishing, no kind of absolutely nothing. And I was just like, oh man, like think of some of the wingers that Genk have had in the past. And I was like, you stick any of them in this game, it could have been 3 or 4-0 within 20 minutes. Like that's how much they were kind of exploited him especially out wide. And I think as well, I messaged you guys being like, Genk need to score again here because we know what they're like. And I think Joris has pulled out a ridiculous stat where it's 20 games now in a row that Genk have conceded. And the goal they conceded was comical. Like, Ngura had gone off for an injury for Cercle, which was a massive loss because I thought he was really good. And Diakite was quite good. They're quite physical. They were really putting... They weren't... Like I said, they weren't proper pressing, but like they were running, if that makes sense. And like they'd hit the channels, they'd do all that sort of stuff. But then Minder comes on and he's the one that scores the goal. Van Kromberger, just absolutely baffling goalkeeping. Like you could see the hesitation each time with him. But that had come, as also said to you guys, that they need to change. Cercle needed to change formation, and Sinel had done that. He'd kind of brought some players into the midfield. Diop seems to be a fan favourite at the Embridal. They really, really like Diop. Not sure why, if I'm honest. There wasn't anything where I was like, this guy's, yeah, everything. But they love him. They absolutely love him. And like he went off and he got a standing ovation when he went off. He scored the penalty. Someone was like, yeah, a couple of people were complaining that Man U should have been taking it. Although again, it's funny is that when you go to the games, you can kind of say Utkus is definitely a player that people aren't very keen on because when he gave the ball away the first time, there was a collective like angry groan. Angry groan of we've seen this so many times this season and maybe last season and maybe the season before. Manny had it a little bit, but he kind of makes up for it in being just a bit of a pest. So he was kind of fine. Van der Bruggen, they love him as well. Like he was really good, I thought, in the second half at just getting things going. Despite he's not as mobile, but he can get things going. Who else did I think had a decent game? Stoikers as well. He's a really interesting one to watch as well, I think, when you go in person, because his passing technique is really, really good. His eye for a pass is really, really good. He just doesn't always get on the ball. When you think, if this guy just gets on the ball in almost every kind of phase of play, he should be able to get stuff done. But Genk had lots of chances, especially when they brought on, was it Medina came on and he suddenly was just like Circle were just getting opened up constantly on the bait with him going through. Delanga made a couple of decent saves. They messed up a couple of those chances. Circle had a couple of chances. They obviously got the penalty, which Diop scored. But this is the first time I realised we actually had TV screens in the press gantry. I was like, this is such a retro stadium. Like, there's no way we've got TV screens. The penalty was given, and this guy like just turned around to the press and was like just shouting at all the individual journalists to tell him if it was a penalty. And I was like, how do we know? We're seeing the same thing as you. And then I like looked up. I was like, oh, we've got a screen. Like we can know. And I was like, yeah, it's definitely a penalty. Like this looks like a penalty to me, without speaking a word of Flemish and having not seen the replay. But I was like, yeah, of course it's a penalty. Like whatever. And it was given, so that was fine. For me, like the worst bit I think of the whole experience was trying to get out of the stadium was impossible. Like that, you get into that press gantry, you're stuck in the press gantry because it's an absolute maze. There's no way out. You think you're going down a staircase and you hit like a row of seats with fans in front of it. Like they just pen you in and don't let you leave. And for someone that was rushing to get the Eurostar, that was quite stressful. But it meant I got to see the end of the game because I was forced to see the end of the game, then sprint for the bus and get out of there. But definitely an entertaining game. I was slightly worried I was going to go into this and see a 0-0. Then I realised it's Cercle Brugge and Genk, and these two teams just love to shoot themselves in the foot. Positives for both sides, I think, in the sense of like some of the play that they were putting together, and it's like for Genk especially, I was like, if you can just solidify this defense, like going forward, the players are there. It's just maybe don't start Joris. Might be my advice, or just someone with a little bit more cutting edge out wide would be great. For Cercle, there's enough talent there, I think, for Sunel to work with. My one fear is that defense it's just got no experience. It's got no experience, and I think Kaku is not a right back, and that was very obvious from the start of the game. He's not a right back. He was a lot better when he kind of tucked in to play centre back alongside Ravic, but Ravic is their best defender, full stop. And we spoke about this, I think, Joris, I'm pretty sure you mentioned this in the preseason preview, that like if he's their best defender, it's a concern. I think they need to go and do what they did last January, and they need to go and get another experienced head. I can't remember the name of the guy they got from Hamburg last year. Perrin? Yeah, he was such a good pickup because he brought that experience and kind of he scored some goals as well. I think they need to do that, which would be really key. I haven't seen anything about the Ngura injury. Hopefully that's not too bad. Minder offers them something different and they can mix it up. And Sunel, it was interesting to see him on the sideline. I think we've mentioned this before, like you don't always see it. You'll maybe see clips of it, but you could see him kind of the way he was talking to the players, the way he was kind of expressing himself. I was like, he wants them to be doing something that I don't think they're quite doing yet. Like they'll do it in bits of bursts of kind of in stages of the game, and you could see that he's happy with it and he's there. But no, I think after the first 20 minutes, I was like, this team is going to finish in the bottom four. At the end of the game, I was like, they could get out of the bottom four, which is probably not what Cercle fans want to hear, but I think that's my kind of theory. And then with Genk, yeah, after the first 20 minutes, I was like, this team has to finish in the top six. And now I'm like, they could miss out on the top six. It could be quite easy. It just depends. Like both teams need to sort out the defenses and stop shooting themselves in the foot. But entertaining game. I don't know if you guys had any thoughts, obviously watching it on TV. Joris, obviously you've got Real Betis coming up next. I have no idea how they're doing because I haven't actually watched much La Liga, but it's always going to be a tough game, like going up against the Spanish side when you're not in really great form yourselves either. So I don't know if you want to kind of share your thoughts on how you think that's going to go and kind of how you felt this one went, because I've rambled on for long enough now.
Difficult one. Okay, I'll quickly jump on that question immediately before I forget to answer that. Real Betis actually only lost one game so far this season in La Liga. They're in 5th position. But yeah, it's difficult anyway, looking at their own squad and the fragility of it, as you just described as well, mainly. To see also we know the attendance is going to be embarrassingly low for the best opponents and the most attractive opponents that Genk have in the, at least on paper, on the in the Europa League. But yeah, on the other hand, also looking at Real Betis itself, that they will rest some players, some key players as well, because of rotation in the Europa League. And so that's one hope, maybe some underestimation. And then let's see how that rolls. It's a completely different competition, of course. But yeah, also there we already seen a two-faced Genk even inside games, but especially over the kind of the course of the games between games. So yeah, difficult to see a good result in that, to be honest. Also looking at how easily Real Betis in the end beat Gent last season as well. Yeah, okay, also that Gent was not in the best of forms, but unfortunately the same goes for the current Genk side. So I guess that kind of could even out. I do not know if they had a lot of activity over the summer, but I think the core is probably similar still. And anyway, it will depend on who they will rest, because with the Gent game, it was in a knockout phase at least, so or a playoff phase. So it's a different situation maybe, but if I'm not mistaken, at least I could be wrong here. But yeah, no, not that much confidence in that game to be fair. But yeah, let's see. Hopefully, Genk can do something in Europe also to boost the confidence in general. And yeah, the Irasor thing is just it's such an annoying thing. Like he is kind of needed, and they bet too much on him, way too much on him. Like if you ask me, I don't get where the confidence comes from the staff and higher up as well from Dimitri Conde. But yeah, and he does offer that speed. That's why he gets into those spaces where unfortunately he most of the time doesn't do anything with. So it doesn't really bring much, but sometimes it does. Sometimes again, like in this game's fixture last season, for example, I think he had 2 assists and a goal or something like that against Cercle. And yes, in Genk won 2-3, something like that. The last 2 fixtures actually between the two before this one ended in 2-3. So until the end, I had some hope that third one would fall for Genk, but in the end, it probably was a relatively fair result. Yeah, Genk had some chances, but Cercle definitely also had some. Yeah, the first 15-20 minutes it looked really good, but afterwards, again, not really. And yeah, like you mentioned, 20 games with at least 1 goal conceded. That's yeah, very worrying. Especially if you look at, I think the next one is like at 6 or 4, maybe even 4 games maximum in the league. Yeah, that's whether it's 6 or 4 doesn't even matter much. The difference is so big. Of course, the fun thing about this kind of statistics, of course, if you do it once, you go to the bottom of that classification. You go from top to bottom straight away. But yeah, that's yeah. It weirdly enough, like the last season when Genk went off to a the actual start was quite difficult, but after they got enough out of there after the first 3 games, they actually at this stage of the season they had only conceded 1 goal more. So that's the strange thing about this, but of course the caveat, of course, like those games they they scored more, and 2 yeah, they won most of the games, not all of them, but most of them, like the 3-4 against Beerschot. Yeah, okay, you concede 3 but you win. Yeah, of course there's the infamous 3-2 win turnaround comeback that's got them in a good flow against Club Brugge. You also concede 2, but who cares ultimately. And there were a few more 3-2s, like I think aforementioned 3-3 in Cercle also was there, in the 3-2 against Sint-Truiden. Okay, going too much into detail here, but the games where they conceded, they still often won, and that changes the perception, of course. But yeah, the weirder thing is maybe actually like at towards the back end of the regular season, they conceded only 6 in the last 10 games, I believe, and scored a bit less, but still, again, they didn't lose any game and won most of them. Yeah, there's some kind of weird balance, because it's the same squad more or less, at least at the back. So like it's a bit strange. Okay, obviously teams will find out, will have found Genk out a little bit. But nonetheless, like there a lot of lack of confidence or something as well, and like yeah, some misjudgments, individual errors, all these kind of things. But like in general, and yeah, that doesn't help to have some confidence in the squad at the moment. Even though the results have, outside of the I would say embarrassing results against Ferencváros in Europe, have been actually improving result wise. But yeah, in this case now, in the league, they got 7 points out of 9. That could have been nil as well. Okay, that could have also it could have even been 3 wins out of 3, but like that would be a miracle basically. If you saw all 3 of the games, they could have easily lost all of them as well. So yeah, that at least the points are a bit more there, so they're a bit catching up and not outside of the top 2. I guess no one else is really running away, but this side should really get into the top 3 easily if you look at the player material. And at the beginning of the season, at least, things can change. But yeah, now I would already sign for a 3rd place, I guess, by this time of the season. But okay, again, way too early to tell. I always say it. Also, when Genk have a good season, playoffs are still coming. But well, let's see if they can get in. That's a question I was hoping not to have in mind already 1/3 of the regular season over, and it does look far from certain for sure. But okay, I also don't want to talk too much about Genk. Usually, this time it was a bit of an exception since, there were exceptional circumstances. But I've also actually been babbling a lot already. Definitely some concerns still at the back, and I could really have a clean sheet. That would be nice.
Well, those with an eagle eye for the detail will know already, and I'll have made a note, no doubt, that me and Ben have now seen Joris's side, Genk, in person more than Joris has this season. There's something kind of quite funny about that, but I'm sure Joris will get a chance to rectify that before the end of the season. With me,
he might not want to be fair.
Well, at this stage, this stage of the season, he might go. I'll leave it till this time next year, maybe. Fink's looking a bit uncomfortable now, and that's been the case for a while. There's nothing new about that. We know that, but yeah, he's looking a little bit more irritable, and his responses to kind of why the juice is not flowing in the way that everyone would like or hope. And, some of his answers, are coming round to luck. We're not playing badly, but we're not taking our chances. And things that you kind of, as a journalist or as a fan, you don't want to hear. They're not what I would call fulsome, proper answers, to be honest. And are generally kind of smoke screens. So there's obviously a bit of frustration internally as well. So, I think in some ways, some decent results in Europe now could go some way to kind of, helping the camp's confidence a little bit as well. Although this is a tough game they've got this week. Just one wee point on Circle, actually, while we were talking in great detail about that game. This is kind of a new cycle for this side, a new cycle for this Circle. I didn't pre-plan that, honestly. But anyway, so many new players there. Even though the essential in-house playing style is the same, there's been some tweaks to the way the pressing works. But yeah, Ben was talking about Muslic ball, and the thing about Muslic ball was it had pace and it had power. And that connection between what was actually a reasonably strong back line at that time and the front line was really well coordinated and just worked. The balance on that side was really good, I think. It's not quite the same with this squad. Ben was touching upon the fact that in the middle of the park, they just seem a little bit lightweight in comparison to how they've been in recent years. So I think the balance there is not kind of quite right. But there's so many new players. A lot of them are very young. You get this feeling that if they stick with what they're doing, maybe 12 months from now, they could look a different side. And I think that's probably the expectation. This might take a season before things start to click in a way that they would like them to. I think Ben's right. I think there's enough potential in this side for that potentially to happen. And I think they've got a really good young coach there, I think, who knows what he's doing. And, Ben saw him up close and in person, was able to watch him in the touchline. I love body language, as people know, so I love getting the chance to do it. I spend as much of my time when I'm at games watching what's going on in the dugout, sometimes more than I do what's actually going on in the pitch, because sometimes that's so much more insightful. It's the advantage to being at a game, I suppose. You see those things that you don't on the TV. But we got some good footage of Ben, because Ben was communicating with me and Joris while we were watching the game. I was sitting in the press box, and And, Ben noticed some tactical tweaks going on in the game, and the camera was on Zanel, and you could see him smiling shortly after those tactical tweaks made a real difference for Circle. So you could see he was patting himself on the back, at being able to, see what was going on in the park, tweak things, and affect the game, and that obviously is the sign of, a good coach who knows what they're doing. So this is just about letting players develop, really, isn't it? And letting him do his thing, because I think they have enough about them to be all right. And as we know, with only one side going down, then, the pressure is a little bit different this season.
Yeah, no, you're right. The switch was really interesting because as well, like they started the second half how they started the first half, but they played slightly differently. Like they pressed really high and they just took the game to Genk straight away. So it was really interesting. He made the switch and then he switched back and he switched again. Like he was kind of mixing it up quite a lot. And like, when different players came on, he'd move things around and stuff like that. And that I think that's what you have to do if you're a coach of a slightly offensive inferior team. Is like, how do I manipulate the game with the players that I have to kind of take away some of these key elements? And it worked in some regards. It didn't work in others where Genk were quite like able to get on the break. They just didn't take the chances. Speaking of managers, let's talk about the kind of the elephant, the Hubert in the room, the big elephant-sized Hubert. Before we get to that, we are recording on the night that Bayern are playing Club, and Nicky Hine said this is an impossible game, and it's already 3-0, and it's only 43 minutes in. I think Joris told us just before that someone in the Belgian press was like 3-0 will be a victory for Club. So congratulations, Club, on your victory in this game. I don't think that's how the fans will see it, to be honest. And I mean, it's just like I'm hoping we've reversed cursed them by just deciding that they've lost this game, and by the time the recording finishes, they've pulled something back. But yeah, ridiculously tough game for them. Union had a tough game. They faced Inter at home. Unfortunately, that was another 4-0 defeat in the Champions League. So back-to-back 4-0 defeats. I mean, again, there's no shame in losing to Inter. Do you know what I mean? Like, that is like Italian football's kind of had a little bit of a renaissance, despite Napoli losing 6-2 to PSV. I don't know how you lose 6-2 to PSV, judging on what we saw of PSV at the beginning of this. But yeah, losing 4-0 to Inter is no kind of shame. But Hubert in charge. I know certain people within Union are good kind of friends of the show, and I'm just so intrigued by it. I honestly, it was so left field to happen, and just to share some kind of insights into kind of how we reacted. Like, I can't remember which one of us broke the news.
I think it was me.
But it was just couldn't believe it. Absolutely, just so random, to be honest. To be managing Leuven at the bottom and struggling, and to be honest, he was like on my list of people that are going to get the sack. To then get the chance to manage Union, like you obviously would never turn that down. Clearly, Union have seen something, and this is the club that they see stuff potentially that other people don't see. So that's kind of where I'm going with, like, they clearly know more than I do about this. And since, Mazu left, they have made the right choice with the head coach every single time. Like, Gerrits was a good choice. He almost won the title. Blesson was an excellent choice. Won the cup. Pocagnoli, I was incredibly sceptical. Didn't think it was going to work. Obviously ended up winning the league and getting the job at Monaco, and a nice pay increase for sure by going there. You can't deny that's definitely going to be the case. So fair play to him, and I wish him all the best, to be honest. Like, it'd be nice for a Belgian coach that's coached well in Belgium to go and do well elsewhere, like Company is and stuff like that. But yeah, Hubert, obviously he wins the first game against Victor Mill, and I think Victor Mill was the one that everyone thought this is the guy that Union want. I just felt that was going to be a perfect match. Like, Victor Mill, I don't know how to really explain it, but they both kind of have this, like, Victor Mill had the Hubert kind of propaganda before he was actually good, if you know what I mean. Like, Hubert's got this propaganda around him that he's had for Leuven to take him, and I thought it was weird that Leuven took him, but Victor Mill had, like, before he went to Veslo, there was like loads of hype around him. Goes to Veslo, they play some nice football. He's like really, really hyped up, despite them not like the way that ended was a bit of a mess. and then suddenly he gets the Charleroi job and does a really good job there. And I'm like, okay, we understand that. Now maybe he's in a little bit of trouble, which is ironic that he'll be the next Antwerp manager not before long potentially, which could be quite funny. But the funniest thing I think that came out of this was the statement that Leuven released about how disappointed they were and how they thought things were going in the right direction, and they're just really, really upset that he's made this decision to leave. And I was like, don't lie. Like, come on. You were probably going to sack him within the next couple of weeks if they didn't start turning things around. Like, let's be honest, it has not gone well. But I'm just intrigued. What do you guys think? Like, I in my mind, this can't work. Like, they can't keep doing this. There's like, what's that? Yeah, there's like memes that they just can't keep getting away with this. Like, they just can't. This is, I think, Joris, you said something quite funny, and I'll let you repeat it if you want to repeat it. It was amusing, but I'm just going to say, you know what? It's Union. It will probably work. It shouldn't work, but it will probably work. And fair play to them. And fair play to him. Like, I don't blame him for taking a job. Like, why would you not take the job? Like, you get to leave Leuven, which is just a weird situation where they don't make the right signings for a club that will sign some bloke from the 4th tier in Germany, and he'll turn out to be one of the best players in Belgium. So there's no excuses now, I guess, for him. Like, he's got one of the best squads in the league. He's got the best scouting department in the league. He's got like everything at his disposal. It's now a chance for him to show everyone that he is the right coach and he is the right man. And he did say something quite funny about that before the Inter game. He was like, "We know it's going to be the hardest game I've ever played." Blah 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 blah. He was like, "Yeah, but they're 11 men like us. They've got 2 lungs and 1 heart just like us." And I was like, that's true, but they've also got 2 feet that are probably better than some of your players as well. So like, you kind of maybe need to think a little bit tactically, and that's where I'm worried. Okay, that's where I'm worried. Is he, like we talked about Sonel making adjustments? Is David Hubert, has he got the tactical nous at the top Champions League level? Like we said, like in the domestic league, it's fine. Like, club have been able to show that it's fine. You can get away with, like, you can't get away with a Scott Parker, but you can get away with someone a little bit better than a Scott Parker if you've got the talent. But when you go into Champions League, it's like what Cercler had to do in that game, where it's like you need to be making adjustments to make up for the quality that you didn't have and the other team does have. Has he got that in him? I'm not convinced. But Scott, I'll let you go first, and then Joris, obviously, feel free to chime in as well.
Well, this appointment was so interesting and so kind of left field, and to most people looking in from the outside, that I had to go and write an article for the Substack to try and process my thoughts once I'd collected myself. Because I'll be honest, much like pretty much everybody else, I was like, WTF? It was just like, and it was right up there with a kind of, okay, I need a minute here, and I really need a minute type appointments. But once I went away and kind of thought about it, and I've been in touch with Alex Muzio, of course, who listens to us most weeks as well, to kind of get Alex's thoughts on this process from the inside. And the club, I felt, explained this, not that they have to, but communicated quite effectively, I think, really what this was all about. There is and there will be people who've read the article already, Perception and Reality, it's called. There is a perception externally around David Hubert as a coach that here is a guy who hasn't done very much as a coach of any note, hasn't really achieved anything, and certainly hasn't done anything interesting enough to warrant, going from where he was to walking into the national champions who are now playing Champions League football. Do you know what I mean? There was a mismatch from an external appearances point of view for people. Internally, I think, and this is where the article, I suppose, is worth a read, because what I was trying to do was really, I think, explain it. And it does make complete sense when you follow the logic of it. So here you have a club who have a really well-oiled and established culture within it. They have staff who've been in place for a long time, a really stable core staff side. Particularly the non-playing staff, so on the coaching staff for the most part, and the backroom staff, and the management staff upstairs, who wanted to appoint, obviously, a young, ambitious Belgian coach, which we should commend them for and do. That's a good thing. Somebody with great experience of youth development. David Hubert has, some pretty interesting youth gigs on his CV, to be fair. So he does tick that box as well. And I think he fits the culture. I think there's a feeling that if you bring somebody in who, fits the long game and the bigger picture, there's enough support in that network system within the club to be able to make it work. So the actual coach, although important because it's up to them to get the results, is slightly less important in terms of the bigger picture in a way. And that's the way effective clubs are kind of run. Some interesting conversations I get into with fans after the article went live, with people saying, well, the Pocagnoli appointment wasn't, didn't grab people, and look how that ended. He went and won the title. So, yeah, they've earned the right to kind of surprise us, I think. And this could very easily go the same way, I think, because of the way that club works. Joris is going to tell us in a minute, and hopefully play devil's advocate and tell us why this is quite a bad idea. And I really do hope he shares what he said to us, because it was very, very funny, in that uniquely Belgian sense of humour. I really appreciated that. It's an appointment I've become much more comfortable with since thinking about it. I actually think he's going to do okay there. I do, because I think he's got a great team around him, who will make him better. Ben touched on the personal challenges for David Hubert now are, he never thought he was going to get this opportunity, I don't think, out of the blue like that. And he's now got the challenge of being the coach that he wants to be. So Union have, given him this wonderful platform to say, okay, we've got faith in you to be the coach who you want to be and you have the ambition to be. You fit our model. We think we can follow Poco with something similar, because the profiles are broadly the same, really. Let's see if we can make this work. Ben's one caveat is the one that everyone has, and from a tactical perspective, we're really going to find out how good David Hubert is, because one of the big questions around him was, is this a coach who is capable of impacting games from a tactical perspective, regardless of what club he's been at? Because there's pretty mixed evidence on that. To be fair to the Union hierarchy, they have studied his periods at Anderlecht and Leuven and see plenty of positives there. And I think they do feel, and this is really important, I think they do feel that with that support network, which has been proven to work, can really help him kind of develop even further as well. Worth mentioning, actually, and highlighting, and I did say this in the article, the interesting thing that nobody was really talking about, I thought, was that David Hubert actually has more coaching experience, certainly at a senior level, than Poco did before he came into Union. Poco's coaching experience was mainly with youth sides at different levels, albeit very interesting ones. Hubert did have the Anderlecht experience behind him and the very short tenure at Leuven. So if you look at it from that perspective, his CV actually has had more weight to it in some respects than Poco's did. So it's odd when you look at this, but they surprise you, and they're a brave football club, and they continue to be that. And I really look forward to seeing how this is going, because Joris's reaction was, this is definitely an experiment of sorts. But this is a football club who like to give people a platform and let them develop, because they see something in them and they trust them. And over the last 4 or 5 years, consistently, they've got very, very little wrong. So there's no reason really for us to distrust them at the moment. There was so much doubt around Poco during his initial 10-12 game period. We thought he was in shaky ground. They stuck with him and he came through it and all came good. So I think Hubert will get time, even if he has a sticky spell, because this is a football club that believes in what it's doing and doesn't panic in a way that most other clubs in Belgium do when you hit a sticky period. So a really, really interesting one, and a fascinating bolt from the yellow and blue.
I will turn around one of the arguments Scott mentioned, namely that Hubert has more experience. Yeah, we've seen what Hubert does, and we're not convinced by it. So, Pocagnoli did not have that chance before, yet at least for the public eye. Indeed, he has managed both at Genk and in Union at in the academy or in at youth levels, younger levels at least. But yeah, that's something we will have to find out, of course. If the and like Scott basically mentioned my well, now already infamous, but it's actually really not that spectacular. I've seen it from other people as well, but comment like, well, they're now really performing an experiment that's showing that the manager is not really important, as important as everyone thinks. So not a statement I'm behind myself, by the way, but like the manager is important in my eyes, for sure. But in one way it could still be, because with all the arguments Scott mentioned, the supporting staff is still in. Most of the supporting staff is still in place. Something that I do think happened. I'm not entirely sure, but I'm quite certain this time they did lose another staff member to Monaco as well, though, the set piece coach, and we'll have to see also. Like, it's difficult to judge then Hubert already solely on that as well. But that we know Union have been good at set pieces, of course, as well. So that if that will have some impact on those set pieces and the outcome of them as well. And Miralas as well, of course, who more or less seems to have been the savior last season a bit, because last season they were playing quite well, but they didn't manage to put the ball in the net enough in the beginning of the season. And after bringing Miralas on as a striking coach, things started rolling a bit more. So there are a few more changes, so that makes it difficult to see if it's solely to see how the experiment is going that I mentioned. Maybe there are some more factors, but like, yes, again, I'm not going to also bet against them anymore. But this feels like the most risky move they had to do. Plus, usually they did change managers, of course, most of the seasons so far. But usually that was at the beginning of the season. So now it's really one stepping in the season. So also with a bit more quicker decision making and a bit less options, I guess, as well, probably. It was good probably that the decision was made quick, and also during the break, so there was some time to still to get him onboarded, let's say. We'll have to see how this all develops. I'm still very skeptical, to be honest. They have proven us wrong a lot of times already over the past couple of years. Hubert, like, the main thing for me is also, like, in a way they maybe have the same profile, Hubert and Pocognoli, but also not really character-wise. Like, in that fits, like the character fit with the club, and how the squad has been managed in before. Actually, with most of the managers, you could see it's this more or less the same style and fitting into this play. I'm not sure if that's the case with Hubert. Then again, I'm not sure if that's necessarily a bad thing, because sometimes shaking things up a little bit can also improve or make it more versatile as well. So that might depend on what he actually brings to the club in the end. I think we've talked about it a lot again as well, but it's interesting appointment. To be fair, like, the Charleroi game, I was not very convinced myself already. Like, it was not their best performance. They took their chances, so they were very efficient. We have to use that word once in a while in this podcast, but I think they scored all of the 3 shots on target that they got in the end. And that's always been a quality of them as well. In the playing level was not great against Inter yesterday. As of recording, it was actually not so bad. The first half was quite good, but you felt like it was one of those games, like the opponent is a bit better. Yes, you can have some chances, and they could, but if you don't take them, you just know it could become painful. It was relatively painful in the end, but nothing too unexpected either, I guess. Yeah, I'm sure people will have hoped a little more after maybe the first half an hour or so, because it was a very even game, and Union did have their chances, especially in the first half. But they faced their limits there. Let's see, like, how it develops. Yeah,
that's kind of you mentioned the game against Inter, is how kind of teams probably feel about facing them at the moment. But you've mentioned something, Joris, that this is what I thought when it initially happened, and this is what I've forgotten, and now you've mentioned it again. It's not like they were playing really well before, like Pochettino, like they were getting results, but they weren't the same level. And it's like, sorry, when he got hired by Anderlecht, I thought it was a terrible hire. When he got hired by Leuven, I thought it was a terrible hire. I remember Scott was really positive about him being hired by Leuven, and I was like, no, I just don't see it. Like watching some of those games, they were like, they had no idea what they were doing. They were playing, was it Ral or someone? The last 20 minutes, they needed a goal. They didn't get a shot on target. Like, they had nothing, and he was doing nothing about it. So yeah, I'm not a fan. I'm not gonna. I don't get it. I don't get the hype. I don't get why everyone thinks this guy's really good when I just don't think he is very good at all. But Scott has convinced me with the structure that's in place. Yes, some people have left, but the structure around him should make him a better coach. Like, he needs to develop, and he's got to develop quickly. Thankfully, he's got enough players there. The players around him are obviously much better, but it's like, I just don't see him being. Yeah, it can't work, but it probably will. Third time lucky for Mr. David Hubert, and it's like you said, yeah, he's got the experience, but the experience hasn't been good. Like, he wasn't good at Anderlecht. Let's be fair. Like, he came in and was just like, it was like he got the new manager bounce at Anderlecht, and then it quickly petered out. He didn't even get a new manager bounce at Leuven. Like, it was just as if nothing had changed. But that might reflect more on Leuven than it necessarily does on Hubert. But we shall see. You guys need to give your.
Spare a thought before we give our players of the week. Spare a thought. You mentioned Rick de Mille. We have to spare a thought for him because that's him being screwed over twice now by Mehdi Bayat. We won't get into the details. Rick went public a little bit over the last few days as well, so we know that he's not too happy. Rick de Mille will be at another club come next season. That's for certain now.
If you get into bed with the man, like, this is what you sign up for.
In some respects,
you can't have it both ways. Yeah, do you know what I mean? Like, you can't have it both. I think he'd have been great at Union.
I do as well. And I feel really sorry for him, actually. So, you know, he'll be on his way at the end of the season, absolutely certain now. My player of the week, actually, just to throw him in there, is Anderlecht's 18-year-old Serbian striker Mihailo Cvetkovic. I thought he was pretty good this past weekend against St. Truden, mainly because he offers Anderlecht something a little bit different. There's something about his link-up play and the way that he joins up the midfield to the forward line that offers Besnik Hazi something a bit different, and we're just starting to see some signs from him now that he could offer them some really interesting options up front, and his defensive work's really good as well. I mentioned his link-up play, but you know what I mean, he's starting to show some signs that, you know, this is a player who could have an impact for the club a little bit quicker than I thought he might have. You know, his all-round game is kind of quite good, and he looks like he's up for it, which is important because Anderlecht need more players who look like they want to fight for their place and develop. You know, they need players like that. I think there's still too many players at the club who are just a wee bit too comfortable, and he's not one of them. He's young and he's hungry, and offers them something different. So looking forward to see if he plays this weekend as well, because he came off with a knee knock in that last game as well, but it doesn't seem to be too bad. So we'll see if he gets some game time this weekend.
That's a good shout, Cvetkovic, of course. I have one player that I'm leaning into from the same game. He didn't start the game, but and he was playing at the other side as well. But he has scored a brilliant goal, Matsuzawa, that is from Sint-Truiden, and not only a brilliant goal, the one that nearly got in was even better. Like, he tried a bicycle kick from an impossible area, but clearly meant to shoot it on goal, and it hit the crossbar, so it very nearly got in. But it didn't happen in the end. That's unfortunate. But he was just a constant threat as well. As soon as he came on, he had a few more actions and shots as well. So interesting to see how that will develop and how he will fit into that side, which is in a good form as well. as well, of course. And yeah, then there's two other players from the same side, but it's a different side than Sint-Truiden. It's Zultuarium that I also want to give a shout in Ementa, who hasn't scored a goal yet for Zultuarium, but also hasn't lost a game since he started. So he lost the first two games where they lost, or they lost a game when he was not starting yet, but since he made it into the starting 11 after these first substitutions appearances, they have not conceded. Conceded, yes, but not lost a game. So yeah, that's promising for him, and also he has been crucial in that. They had been picking up points before that, but since then they're really on a tear, and barely dropping any points. Only against La Louvière, I believe, where every game now is indeed a 0-0, as has been already mentioned. So that's not a big shame. But another shout, Thomas Klaas, that was really good, well in midfield there. A bit of a left field pick because Zultuarium as a whole was quite good this weekend against Gent with a 4-1. So not picking outside of Ementa, not picking the more obvious striking option. Ehrenberg, of course, also was good. But the motor on the midfield, I guess, in Klaas, who won the most tackles in the game and just was really good in the duels. I think he won 7 out of his 10 duels or something, and almost all of them, the ground duels in the air. He's a bit less good, but that's you can forgive him for that, I guess. And well, he actually also scored a goal, of course. That does help. It was also not a bad goal from him either, but and an important first one as well, of course, in this game. Really good game from Zultuarium in general as well. So I thought it was a good moment to give a few of their players a shout as well.
Yeah, can't argue with either of those two. Svetovic looks like he's really settling in, which is good for them with Dolberg having left and Bertuccini slowly getting back from injury. Oh, yeah, I mean, you look at that result and you're like, how many of those players are Ghent going to try and buy from Zultuarium in the summer? Because I reckon the two you mentioned are probably on the list. Ehrenberg's definitely on the list. A couple of others, a Poku, they'll probably try and go for. That's their scouting for the season done, to be honest. The summer wish list is every player that scores against us or has a half decent season. So, yeah, who knows who will end up there. But, yeah, I think Zultuarium deserve a great bit of credit. They really are doing quite well at the moment. And I like Amenta. He's really raw, but it seems to work at the moment. So fair play to him. Eagle Id listeners, you will notice we unfortunately run out of time for CPL news this week because there was just so much talk about in the Pro League, but we will not forget the CPL. We will extend, I'm going to promise it now, as long as nothing ridiculous happens in the Pro League or the Champions League or European football, we'll have a more extensive kind of look at the CPL next week because, yeah, there's so much to go through over that we'll be here for another half an hour probably just talking through things that have come out of that division. So, yeah, sorry to those of you I know who've maybe waited for the whole episode just to get some CPL action. Now you're going to be disappointed, but we promise you we'll be back with a little bit more CPL next week. Guys, it's been good to be back in the UK and back speaking to you guys about Belgian football after the international break.
It has. Have a brilliant week, everybody. Whatever you're up to, we'll do it all again next week.
And just one final, still thinking about the CPL nonetheless, like Beveren have dropped some points, their first point of the season. So I have to mention that, not against Beveren, but just to give a little snippet at least of the CPL. They're still very comfortably in the lead, of course. So that's clear. But they had dropped their winning streak now.
Yes, they did. And we can speak about if there are any ramifications about that next week when we talk CPL. As per usual, if you like this podcast, you haven't reviewed it, please do leave us a review on your podcast app of choice. If you want to donate, feel free to donate to us. Buy me a coffee. It helps fund this podcast. I'll put a link to Scott's piece on David Hubert that if you haven't read it, definitely do read it. It kind of, expands on the chat that we've just had. And as Scott mentioned, he pulled some stuff out from there. So the link to that will be in the show notes, as well as the link to sign up to the Substack as well, because I mean, if you haven't done it, what you're doing, because it's just a fantastic source of all news from the Pro League in the week, and anything we don't get to cover in this podcast is always in there as well. But yeah, as always, thank you very much for listening to this episode, and we will be back with another one this time next week.